In 2015, large oil reserves were discovered on the offshore shelf of Guyana, a small country bordering Venezuela. According to preliminary estimates, the resource volume is about 13 billion barrels, which is comparable to the reserves of Azerbaijan. Foreign energy giants quickly began developing the country's offshore oil fields. Key shares in the projects were acquired by the American company ExxonMobil, the French company Total, and the Chinese company Sinovac. A cash windfall hit the country, which has just over 800,000 people. One of the poorest countries in the world suddenly showed the fastest gross domestic product growth on the planet, 43% in just 2024 alone. Gross domestic product per capita soared to $31,000 in 6 years. That's more than Poland and Kuwait, and the same as Portugal. But, as some of you know, if your neighbor is a scumbag, he won't let you live in peace. Venezuela has oil reserves that are exactly 23 times larger than those of Guyana. Once Nicolas Maduro hears black gold was found in the neighboring country, he quickly recalls that Bogdan Khmelnytsky signed with He recalls the British incorrectly drew the border here. In 2023, Nicolas Maduro holds a referendum asking Venezuelans if they want Caracas to regain control of the ancestral Essequibo lands. This region covers over half of Guyana, including the full offshore oil shelf. The Venezuelans support it. In 2024, Maduro announces the creation of the state of Guyana Essequibo and even appoints a governor for it. It goes further. Caracas builds multiple military bases near Guyana and gradually moves troops to the border. In 2025, the initial clashes begin. Venezuelan soldiers wound 6 Guyanese soldiers. On March 1st, a Venezuelan warship enters Guyana's territorial waters and maneuvers near the ExxonMobil platform. It's not hard to guess how all this would have ended if Marco Rubio hadn't flown to Guyana's capital, Georgetown, at the end of March with the clear message, "We will help protect your territorial integrity." Trump then accused Venezuela of smuggling drugs into America and ordered suspicious boats in the waters to be sunk. The real reason for moving the United States Navy near the Bolivarian Republic and starting Operation Southern Spear was not drug trafficking. It's not really about Guyana or its oil production threat. It's just that the United States suddenly remembered that they are the world's policemen. And I admit I'm honestly glad about that.
We're considering all possible courses of action, and I think a ground operation is next. I doubt Congress will have trouble approving this. Also, a formal declaration of war may not even be needed. We can just kill the people who are involved in bringing drugs into our country. Okay, we'll wipe them out to the death.
Of course, the Z-scum who watch my videos will probably rush to leave a snide comment. I'm glad we're preparing action against the Maduro regime, but I also condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And they'll definitely add their favorite thing. That's different. We'll talk about this disgusting and utterly deceitful meme. That's different later. For now, it's important to note the following. Donald Trump's administration is indeed trying to restore the status quo in South America, which is, as they say, its sphere of interest. Although this video mainly covers Russia losing its oil markets, a possible special operation against Maduro matters for our region and for Trump, but not because Venezuelan oil would flood the market after the regime falls. If that were the goal, Trump would have agreed to Nicolas Maduro's offer to open the country's largest oil fields to American companies. This is for anyone who believes the United States is after this republic's resources. No, the dispute with Venezuela is mainly political. By pressuring Caracas, Trump, either on his own or advised by hawkish officials, is mainly signaling opponents of the United States, especially China. The message is easy to read. America will not tolerate pro-Chinese and pro-Russian authoritarian regimes in its hemisphere that are openly destabilizing and threatening American investments. This was actually stated nearly directly by Minister of War Pete Hegseth. In this context, China's and Russia's reaction to the Caribbean Sea situation is interesting. Official Beijing opposes excessive United States actions against a sovereign state's fleet, though it's unclear what qualifies as excessive. As one of Venezuela's main arms suppliers, China sold the country C-802A anti-ship missiles with a range of up to 180 kilometers. And also, according to some reports, China helped build the country's air defense for Maduro by selling the latest long and medium-range radar systems, such as the JY-27A with active phased array antenna technology capable of detecting stealth aircraft. They also provided early warning radar systems for low-flying targets, such as cruise missiles. But here's what's interesting. After 2023, China abruptly stopped exporting weapons to Venezuela. After Maduro began preparing to invade Guyana, it became clear that Beijing's geopolitical capabilities are very limited. He knows the United States may see more supplies as aggression. Still, as we know, Maduro, feeling threatened, asked to unfreeze supplies this year.
As American forces build up in the Caribbean, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is seeking help from Russia, China, and Iran to boost his weakened military, requesting defensive radars, aircraft repairs, and possibly missiles.
Yes, if Beijing, with all its capabilities, did not respond to Caracas's call, then Putin, hoping to draw the United States into a bloody confrontation with Venezuela, immediately began supplying weapons to the Bolivarian Republic. We know for sure about the deliveries of the Pantsir anti-aircraft missile and gun system and the Bukem 2. What the Russian transport Il-76 brought the second time, we do not know for certain. However, Moscow suggested it might transfer strike missiles, likely anti-ship. Washington, of course, notices all these deliveries and even expresses serious concern, but so far has not taken any retaliatory measures. I hope it's only temporary. Anyway, 2 air defense systems don't seriously threaten the American fleet. That means Trump can continue to apply pressure. Especially since, by and large, the military Operation Southern Spear has already begun, but it's still hard to say how it will end. The press rumors say Maduro may step down for full amnesty. However, the mobilization he announced last week in the country somehow contrasts with the rumors in the press about Maduro's willingness to resign. The Venezuelan dictator may be able to wait out the threat, as the United States strike group's composition doesn't indicate ground operations. Near Venezuela, the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford is currently stationed with 75 planes, 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, 3 landing ships, and a submarine on board. 10 F-35 jets, 3 B-1 Lancer bombers, and an unspecified number of MQ-9 Reaper drones were also transferred to the Puerto Rico Air Base. The total number of military personnel involved is about 10,000 people. The fleet off the coast of Venezuela can launch between 90 and 160 Tomahawk cruise missiles in a single salvo. Overall, the forces are quite significant, but it's clearly not enough for a ground operation.
Venezuela is conducting large-scale military exercises. According to reports, their goal is to increase the country's defense capability and strengthen the protection of its airspace against possible foreign aggression. Roughly 200,000 armed forces, militia, and police personnel are participating in the maneuvers. Public figures associated with the government of Nicolas Maduro are also taking part in the exercises.
Yes, of course, the top leadership of Venezuela, against the backdrop of the announced Special Operation Southern Spear, continues to prepare for a possible escalation and is conducting large-scale exercises. Special emphasis is placed on air defense, since in Caracas they understand that under any circumstances, Trump will first order the establishment of a no-fly zone over the Republic. As I mentioned, a ground operation with American forces is unlikely. However, the motor vessel Ocean Trader, the so-called ghost ship used by United States Special Forces that appeared off Venezuela's coast, suggests that eventually an American boot will step onto Venezuelan soil. Presumably, that's the Ministry of War's calculation. At the first stage, using Tomahawks to strike command centers and air defense system locations, then establishing a no-fly zone over Venezuela, and after that deploying special forces to arrest Nicolas Maduro, counting on the fact that the first 2 stages will sow chaos in the Republic and create internal discontent among the political elites, especially since the United States already tried capturing Venezuela's president. In 2020, during Trump's first term, 60 Venezuelans under the supervision of the Green Berets attempted an operation to capture or eliminate Maduro. However, things didn't go as planned from the start. American special forces were captured and sentenced to 20 years in prison in Venezuela. Will Trump succeed on his second attempt? It's hard to say for now, but we hope for the best.
All the militaries in the world tremble before the power of the Iglesias, and we have no less than 5,000 of these anti-aircraft missiles. The unaware will understand. And these are simulator devices.
Well, now 2 questions arise. First, why should we even care about what's happening on the other side of the world? Especially since, as I said earlier, it's unlikely that Washington's plan is to let Venezuelan oil onto the market. And we should also keep in mind that, in any case, restoring oil production in the country will take more than a year, because Venezuela's entire oil industry is in serious decline. But that's not the main point here. The fact is, in geopolitics, the laws of nature still haven't been cancelled by anyone. Unfortunately, probably not. And a successful demonstration of strength by the United States is not just an act of intimidation, but a signal to all participants in the system. America still has to be reckoned with. And in this regard, Trump, whom, as you know, I like to criticize, may turn out to be a person capable of restoring not even the authority of his country, but the status quo, where the United States acts as an arbiter in international relations and is ready to use force against those who violate the principles of these very relations. But somehow it turned out that it was Donald's aggressive approaches that worked, and the 47th President of the United States managed to force India, albeit not very willingly, to reduce its purchases of Russian oil. At least, as far as we know, the largest Indian oil refineries are not placing orders for Urals for December. Saudi Arabia, seeing these actions by Dhoni, immediately starts dumping prices on its main commodity and offers discounts on its extracted oil. And China, being a market economy after all, starts reducing its imports of black gold from Russia, switching to hydrocarbon supplies from the Persian Gulf. Of course, this doesn't mean New Delhi and Beijing will stop buying Russian oil right away. Counting on that, given Russia's use of shadow tankers, is simply foolish. But one way or another, this creates costs for Moscow, which means Putin will simply have less money. That's a good thing, you have to agree. Also, the Kremlin dictator's sudden announcement of a first visit to India since 2021 clearly shows the situation is getting complicated. But if Trump solves the problem with Maduro soon, it will only increase his influence. It will also weaken the authority of Beijing and Moscow, who are allies of Venezuela's authoritarian regime. So let's keep our fingers crossed for old Donny and hope that during the preparation of Operation Southern Spear, they've laid the political groundwork in Venezuela itself for a quick transition to normal life after Maduro's collapse. Venezuelan politician Maria Corina Machado, a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, has strong support in the Bolivarian Republic. The main thing is that Trump doesn't back down, because if he does, it will undoubtedly deal a serious blow to the authority of the United States itself. As they say, it's the law of the jungle. Here's the second question from the community members. What double standards do I have? How is the United States better than Russia if Washington plans its own special military operation in Venezuela and I support it? Well, let me answer with a bit of historical background. It won't take long. These are shots from an emergency meeting of Iranian parliamentarians where Saddam Hussein, who had just come to power, is reading out the names of the deputies who were supposed to leave the hall. No one ever saw these politicians who betrayed Saddam again. This marked the start of one of the Middle East's most terrifying dictatorships. Saddam Hussein led a regime that committed genocide against its own people. In the Anfal operation alone, his army killed up to 182,000 Iranian Kurds. 700,000 members of this ethnic group would be placed in concentration camps. During the Anfal operation, Hussein's forces used poisonous substances sarin, tabun and VX against their own citizens. In fact, just like during the Iran-Iraq war, Hussein would personally give orders to use poisonous substances. This all ended with the invasion of Kuwait, from which Saddam's army was expelled by a United States-led coalition in 1991. Over the next 12 years, the Iraqi dictator relentlessly built his cult of personality, suppressed dissent, continued genocide against Kurds and Shiites, and frequently fired on British and American planes enforcing no-fly zones over Kurdish Iraq. In 1998, he expelled all United Nations chemical weapons inspectors, which became a very alarming signal. Then you know the rest. Yes, when these scum need to justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine, they often cite the United States' invasion of Iraq and ironically use the phrase, "You don't understand, this is different." Actually, I think using this meme is often very inappropriate because everything is really understood in comparison, and the invasion of Iraq, unlike the invasion of Ukraine, is truly a completely different thing. Earlier, I explained very briefly what the difference is, and the attempt to remove dictator Maduro, a man who drove one of the richest oil countries into a years-long crisis, completely usurped power, killed and tortured more than 300 opposition members, destroyed any semblance of elections, and was preparing to invade a neighboring country is also different. But I'm not trying to once again expose Russian propaganda. Rather, I wanted to remind you that the world actually became safer after the United States invasion of Iraq. And not only because one of the most brutal regimes on the planet fell, but also because the United States demonstrated that they have such power that they were able to destroy the largest Middle Eastern army in just 20 days. Many opposed the intervention, condemned the United States, and had valid reasons for doing so. But now, 22 years later, our planet is on the brink of World War III, and nuclear rhetoric has become so commonplace among some world leaders that no one even pays attention to it anymore. And all of this is precisely the result of the fact that the states, as many wanted, stepped back from the role of world leader and gradually lost both their total military superiority and their political dominance. Of course, maybe some people are happy about this, but it could end in a lot of bloodshed. Still, there is hope. That's why I hope that a successful operation against a deranged dictator who was preparing a plan to occupy a neighboring country can at least scare off other scumbags like Maduro himself, even if just a little. Although, time will tell.